Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Mark Steiner. Great to have you with us once again. The 10th Congressional District in Texas is a storied political district. It's a district, albeit in a slightly different configuration, that was represented by then Congressman named Lyndon Baines Johnson, who later became, of course, President of the United States. It was gerrymandered to be a safe Republican district, though it includes Austin and parts of Houston. The man who won the Democratic primary is a progressive, backed by the brand new Congress. His name is Mike Siegel. He's an assistant city attorney in Austin, Texas. He'll be challenging conservative Republican Congressman Michael McCaul, who is chair of the House Committee on Homeland Security. And joining us now is Mike Siegel. Mike, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
Texas is a changing state, isn't it?
Oh,
People
definitely.
think of it as a safe Republican state, but nothing is safe anymore.
Well, we like to say that it's a non-voting state. It's not a red state or a blue state for that matter, but there's a lot of people that don't vote here, unfortunately by design. But this year...
What do you mean by design?
Well, there's a history of voter suppression in Texas, unfortunately, largely led by the Republican Party, to first diminish the power of your vote by gerrymandering, by drawing these districts that pack Democrats into a smaller number of districts and give safer seats to the Republicans, but also by other voter suppression tactics like voter ID laws, which disproportionately impact Black, Latino, and elderly voters who would otherwise vote Democrat.
So how do you and other people who are progressive deal with that and address that issue? I mean, especially in your campaigns, how does that affect your ability to run for Congress or other seats in Texas?
Well, to some extent, we're fighting on an unlevel or an uneven playing field. And there are a number of court cases that have found the lines to be discriminatory, the voter ID law to be discriminatory. Those cases are not going to resolve in time for this election. So we're going with what we got, and what we have is a wonderful popular upsurge of involvement, not only here in Austin, but across the district, even in rural areas. There are Democrats who used to think of themselves as isolated. They didn't know that they had neighbors who were in the party and who wanted to vote for progressive ideals, but now they're finding each other and getting out. So I'm very optimistic that this year, even with the unfair advantages that the Republicans have given themselves, that the Democrats can win a lot of power here.
So I'm curious, I'm going to ask you one straight up political question about this race and then come back to some of the issues you're talking about and SB 4, which is a state Senate bill that you fought against in Texas, which I think is really important to discuss. But so strategically, thinking about this, I mean, you're in a district that went for, if I have it right, 9 points for Trump, by 9 points over Hillary Clinton in the last election. So
that's right.
How do you strategize, even though you're from Austin, parts of Houston are there, and there's also some Democratic following inside of some of the rural areas as well. I mean, strategically, how do you address that?
Well, I have to admit that when I got into this, running against an incumbent with about $400 million in family wealth and a district designed to keep him in power forever, I thought of it more as a David and Goliath operation. We're challenging this guy, just for the principle of it, that he shouldn't be safe. I mean, we're not safe here. Whether you're a woman who needs reproductive health care, a worker living on $7.25 an hour, you name it, so many of us are unsafe. So why should McCaul be safe? But as I've gotten into it, I've realized that we really do have a path to victory, and more I feel like we have a great chance of success. And our path is to speak to progressive ideals. I say I'm running from the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party, fighting for universal health care, fighting for jobs, fighting for a living wage and improvements to Social Security, and really getting out our base, because the problem for Democrats in Texas is not that there aren't enough of us. It's just that enough of us don't vote. And so we're lucky enough this year to have great campaigns up and down the ballot. You might have heard of Beto O'Rourke's campaign for United States Senate. And he's really getting a lot of people out who have never been out before. Just last night, I was in a town called Katy, which is to the west of Houston. It's Katy, Texas.
Katy, Texas. Okay, yeah.
And historically a red suburb of Houston, part of the oil-producing community, but increasingly diverse. As Houston sprawls to the west, it becomes more and more diverse with folks from around the world. And last night in Katy, we had 1,000 people at a town hall that I got to speak at with Beto. All the old Katy Democrats said it's the most Democrats in one location that they've ever seen in their whole lives. And that's the story across the state. Even in the rural areas, we get 24 people out on a weeknight, people ready to host block walking parties, host phone banks. And so there's a wonderful upsurge of energy motivated by Trump, motivated by the family separation policy, by attacks on health care, and also just by the lack of common decency in the federal government. There are plenty of Republicans and moderates who tell me they just can't stand the way, Trump is acting towards African American people, towards women. I mean, you name it. There's just this horrible, pervasive, really abusive language that's being used, and people are sick of it.
So let's talk a bit about this. One of the issues that you fought for earlier on, which was to combat SB4, the state Senate bill in Texas. Tell our viewers about that, because if you're not from Texas, you don't know what that's about, and that was kind of what pushed you and pushed this campaign a bit in the beginning.
That's right. I'm a former civil rights lawyer. I've been working at City Hall in Austin for a few years. And in 2017, after Trump was elected, the Texas Republicans decided they were going to follow Trump's lead and attack immigrants as a basis to appeal to their base. And so they introduced this law, Senate Bill 4, which is basically the Texas version of SB 1070, which was introduced in Arizona a few years ago. And it had a number of provisions. And it said to our local sheriff here, you know what, no matter what, you have to turn over every prisoner to ICE, even if they're picked up on the most minor of offenses, even if deportation is going to destroy a family. You have to turn everybody over to ICE. And then the other portion was a show me your papers provision, which is essentially told police officers across the country they can decide to stop someone and ask for their citizenship status and paperwork for any reason at all. And we knew that that was basically an open door to racial profiling. I mean, because how is a police officer going to decide who to ask for papers, right? I mean, if I'm out in Austin one night and I jaywalk and a police officer sees me, is he or she likely to ask me for my passport? No, right? So we knew it was opening the door to racial profiling and attacks on the immigrant community. So I was lucky enough to be in a place where we have a progressive city council who was organizing against Senate Bill 4, and I was asked to join the litigation. Ultimately, we got together 5 of the largest cities in Texas. I'm talking about Houston, Dallas, El Paso, San Antonio, and Austin. And we all joined together to sue the governor. We were able to stop some of the worst aspects of this law. And also, we kind of set a new standard for how political organizing could go in Texas. The idea that the largest cities are ready to unite against some of these hateful policies gives hope to a lot of progressive movements here and shows that we really can push back against what these Republicans are doing.
So let's talk about some of the issues here that are really kind of grinding in this campaign and grinding and hitting Texas hard as well as the rest of the nation. But the immigration issue is one. And it's an issue that seems to me that divides Texas down the middle almost. People are one way or the other. They either want to see a wall, they want to see people deported, they don't want Mexicans and Latin Americans coming to the United States. And then clearly there's the progressive issue which says the wall is absurd and all people are Americans and we should be opening our country up as brothers and sisters. So, I mean, how is that playing? I mean, what are you finding? I'm very curious about how that works out in a place like Texas.
So just to give you a little context of my district, it's 9 counties. Austin is in Travis County. It crosses 7 rural counties before it gets to Harris County in the Houston area. And so I almost have 3 different types of districts within mine. You know, a pretty liberal Austin, we call it the blueberry and the tomato soup. Then these rural counties, which are traditionally Republican. And then Harris County, which is mixed. And so there's different ideas in each area. But I would say big picture on immigration, family separation, nobody likes. You know, even the most conservative Catholics in the rural areas are wondering why their government is doing this. And also, there are moderates in other areas that see it as just a boondoggle. For example, I'm going up against Michael McCaul, who wrote a bill that would put $25 billion towards the border wall. At the same time, the Harris County, the Houston side of my district, just suffered from Hurricane Harvey in 2017, which was exacerbated by a lack of flood control infrastructure. And 10 years before, there were these red flags put out by the United States government, the Army Corps of Engineers, that said these 2 dams that basically keep millions of people safe are in catastrophic, they're in extreme danger of catastrophic failure, was what the Corps said. And yet these Republicans couldn't find $1 billion to fix the flood control. Meanwhile, they can find $25 billion for a border wall. So I think there's folks in the Houston side who might ordinarily vote Republican that see these folks as mismanaging the government. They can't even keep their own constituents safe. They're so busy with these political stunts like a border wall, which will do nothing to make us safe, that they can't even do the kind of the core competencies of government. You know, let's have safe roads, bridges, and flood control facilities. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. Finish what you were saying. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish.
So I guess, there might be a lot of folks in this district who say, we can't have open borders. I'm not advocating for open borders. They would say we need to make sure that everybody here has proper paperwork. And I think many Mexican and Central American immigrants would agree. They just wish the immigration system would work so that there was actually a line that progressed. But folks, I think they're ready to draw the line at huge wastes of money like a border wall and completely inhumane actions like family separation. And so that family separation issue is huge because my opponent is chairman of Homeland Security, and he backed that policy. So I'm turning that into one of the major issues that I'm running on, basically human decency.
And you mentioned water, and I read an article in the Austin American Statesman, that's the name of the newspaper in Austin, Texas, and they talked about your opponent using more water in a area strapped for water to water his lawn than anybody else around. I mean, even more than the rest of his community, which is one of the wealthiest communities in America. Is that true?
Yeah, and it's not even his only house, just to put it in context. I mean, they found that he used 1.5 million gallons, which is about 30 times what my family used last year. And
wait a minute. We don't use that much water?
Well, I'm a modest civil servant here. Don't have a 7-acre estate. But I think that issue by itself, it's almost humorous. I mean, it's a huge waste. But his response to the newspaper was, "Well, I've broken pipes." The problem is that he was the same wasteful water user in 2011, 2012. He said broken pipes then too, and he's getting a water bill of $10,000 or $15,000 a month. Most of us, if we had broken pipes that was costing us thousands of dollars, we would do something about it. So it's symbolic of how wealthy and out of touch he is. And also, I think in rural areas where they can't get enough water to grow their crops, I mean, they're like, who is this guy? I mean, he's just pouring water down the drain, and I can't even get enough water for my rice crop or my sorghum crop. And so to me, it's illustrative of how out of touch he is, how his wealth makes him completely oblivious to the needs of regular people.
So one of the realities of politics in America has to do with money and the fuel campaigns. And he's raised at least easily 10 times more than you have, out of state and within the state. So how do you organize a campaign in a place like Texas with this kind of vast district in terms of just space when you're up against that kind of moneyed opposition?
That's right, and that's probably why I'm the nominee and not some better-known Texas politician. Folks looked at this space, they said, hey, McCaul's got more money than God. Why would I go against him? But I start from the premise that you can't buy people, right? McCaul might have all the money in the world. He can buy all the TV ads he wants, but he can't buy volunteers. And so because I'm fighting for the things people care about, whether it's universal health care, building rural hospitals, broadband, internet in the rural areas, you name it, people are volunteering on my campaign. I have over 500 people that have volunteered for my campaign, either to knock on doors, make phone calls, write postcards, all these different ways you can help. And so I can counteract his money with people power. And I have raised over $200,000 to date, which, from DC's point of view is not a lot of money, but it's more than a Democrat has raised in this district in over 10 years. And I'm using all that money to knock on doors and organize voters. And so I can counteract his, I guess you might call it air cover. He can pay for advertising, things like that, with my ground game, which is people powered. At the same time, I started out this race. Actually, I was working full time at the city of Austin while I was running. But luckily, my wife is a veterinarian, a businesswoman. She's freed me up to work full time on this campaign. And I'm actually raising much more money now. And so I'm optimistic that by the end of this race, I'm going to have 1,000 volunteers in the field, dozens of staff, and I'm going to be able to reach every voter 3 times in person and tell everybody, hey, you have a huge choice and a real choice to make. You have someone that's going to fight for your health care or someone that voted to cut your health care. You have someone that's going to fight for progressive tax policies, or you have someone that voted to give themselves a $40 million tax cut. Because McCaul is so rich, when he voted for that tax cut, that's what his family netted from the estate tax cuts and so forth. I'm going to fight for quality infrastructure. This guy, he's so busy kissing up to Donald Trump, he can't even be bothered to really take care of the needs of the people here. And so I'm confident.
You have debates coming up before the election?
He has not agreed to debate me. It might be that the first time we're in the same room together is in front of the Houston Chronicle editorial board. I'm going to continue to reach out and offer that to him. But, my job is just to knock on doors and raise a little money so other people can knock on doors for me and, let the cards fall where they may. And I'm very, encouraged by all the results of the special elections throughout this last year. The race in Ohio 12, which is still too close to call, is analogous to mine. That was a race where Trump won by 11, where the incumbent had previously won by 26 points, and it's still less than a point, several days after the election. And so my race is actually more competitive than that one. So I feel really good about my chances in November.
Well, Mike Siegel, we'll see how this rolls out, and we'll be following your campaign and you. And I appreciate you taking the time with us here at the Real News Network. Great to meet you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. Keep doing what you're doing.
Take care, Mike. And I'm Mark Steiner here for the Real News Network. Thanks for joining us. We'll be talking together soon. Take care.